I haven't got it. All right, I think we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Localization Fireside Chat. My name is Pei Ying. I will be your host today for this live streaming session. And joining us will be our guests from Khan Academy and code.org. I'm so delighted to have them. This is our first time hosting guests from outside the organization. But before we start our introduction, I'd like to remind people a few things, our viewers, if you're watching live, is that the chat session is scheduled for 30 minutes or longer if that needs to be. And we'll go over questions from Google form that collected in advance. And we'll also keep an eye, or at least will keep an eye on Matrix and on YouTube. If you're joining us live, drop us a question if you have questions for our guests. But I will say no off-topic questions will be addressed. And if we have additional questions we couldn't answer, we'll answer them online after the live stream. And we'll also send you a feedback form after the session is over. So let me start the round of introduction. I'll start first. My name is Pei Ying Mo. I'm one of the localization program managers in the team. And our group is not centralized, but our group do serve most of the company's needs. And that covers a lot of areas. And I've been with the company for 10 years. In one area, I'm responsible for web-based products, such as Mozilla.org, and where I actually work with community volunteers. And then I also spend a significant amount of time with translation agencies, with platform service provider to help address the needs from our other teams, such as marketing and legal teams, because their content is a little bit unique. What about you, Carol from Khan Academy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Carolina Salazar. I go by Caro. I am a Localization Program Manager at Khan Academy, and I've been here for almost 5 years. And the localization team is actually part of the international, what we call international, but it's more about like growth, internationalization, and all in one. And yeah, so that's my role. Jorge?
Hi, everyone. I'm Jorge Castro. I am the Localization Manager at code.org. The Localization Program in code.org falls under the umbrella of the international program that attempts to mobilize policies to fund the computer science education in the world, work with partners to raise awareness about computer science education, and to implement computer science learning curricula, and awareness and implementation. There we go. Those are my bullet points. But yeah, I work with both with engineering and marketing teams to get all of the content meant for global audiences translated to the best of our ability. I look forward to this chat.
Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Cara. So both of your companies actually focus on educational type of content, and also in most cases it's in video format. So that's kind of new for most other companies. For those of us who don't know too much about your companies, nonprofit organizations, could you tell us a little bit more about your product, Jorge?
Yeah, so code.org started creating short 1 hour long tutorials where students would learn computational thinking and the basics of programming. And that is where, the Hour of Code awareness campaign came from, just having a tiny introduction to computer science. And after that, many teachers and schools and students around the world were wanting more. So the team went from creating a very basic curriculum to now fully fledged curricula with teacher lesson plans, tons of videos, auxiliary materials, unplugged activities for grades K through 12, and even including modules for self-paced learning for teachers on how to use the platform to implement computer science in their school. So this multifaceted or rather multi-layered platform that we have is how we try to bring computer science to every school. So first by empowering teachers to bring it in, and then by having very appealing and interactive lessons for the students to delve into it.
Wow, fascinating. It's also complicated because sounds like it's very, very, it covers a lot of bases, but also quite individualized too. What about you, Kara?
So Khan Academy was founded by Sal Khan, and he started actually by creating videos specifically in math. But it's been over 10 years since that happened. And by now we cover videos, exercises. We have also like practice on computing, program creation. We now cover math, science, humanities, computing, and more from kindergarten to high school AP courses, and even preparation for some exams like the SAT. And we are available in over 50 languages, 25 of them in mobile. And we rely on, for most of them, we rely on our community to get them translated.
Wow, that's a lot of work. Can't wait to hear how that gets done. So you talk about the platform. It seems like you have partners, and it also depends on the language and the region. How do you share this platform with the volunteers? Do you all share the same thing, or it depends on what's available for them and it's more regionally developed? How does that work? What happens in Khan Academy?
So the way it works for us is we share the same platforms, but our volunteers are actually able to choose to localize whatever courses they prefer. So we have actually 5 locales that we do work on through LSPs, and on those, Khan Academy chooses what are the courses that we're going to be focusing on. But for all the other languages that are actually led by volunteers, and there's typically what we call the lead advocate, but it will be kind of like a country manager or language manager. And they get to choose basically which courses to localize. Of course, with our guidance, we work closely with all of them, but each team actually is responsible for their own funding, for their pace, for how big is their team, for how many volunteers they actually work with. So we have different sizes of teams, and it varies quite greatly depending on the language. And yeah, but it's wonderful that a huge part of my job is actually collaborating with this volunteers, from translators to the community, well, the language managers, as I was just calling them. So it's very interesting day-to-day work. Jorge, how does it work at code.org?
Yeah, pretty similar to how it works at Khan Academy. We make all of the translatable material available in the same TMS for volunteers as we do for our LSPs. And previously, like I would say 3 to 5 years ago, we were still operating, we were still relying greatly on our volunteers. And we had lots of volunteers coming through because they had a lot of enthusiasm for the product and to bring it into their classrooms. So I worked with a lot of teachers and a lot of software engineers who were just passionate about the project. And I would say that one of like the most joyous things from the job is to harness that enthusiasm and direct it towards translating a small part of the site. And that gets to a distinction of that brings me to the distinction of who's actually translating the product. So we have individual volunteers who come out of their own accord, who find through our website, who find the invitation to go join the TMS Crowden and request to join as a translator. And from there, I guide them through the gigantic repository, which is an area of improvement for us that we have available for translation, and point them in the right direction for them to find what they were looking for to translate. But then we also have groups, volunteer groups that either directed by our Code.org international partners, or that are directed by our corporate partners. So I created opportunities for groups of volunteers to translate or proofread significant larger parts of the website. Front-facing materials like the marketing pages or the course landing pages, and even small tutorials and modules. And for the bigger stuff where we've made the investment to translate into multiple languages. So to take a step back, we support at the moment 64 languages. And when I say that, I mean that at least 1 hour of code tutorial is supported in the 64 languages that are available in our drop-down menu. And out of those 64 languages, 32. For the 32 of those, we've had donors that were interested in us making our primary school curriculum available, computer science fundamentals. So we translated a significant amount of computer science fundamentals, what was available for translation then, to get us a foot in the door for talking to ministries of education, build new partnerships, and that was a fruitful investment. We developed various partnerships that are still bringing many returns. But right now, we're trying to become more lean with our strategy, and we're trying to optimize for quality and for more translatability. So we're lowering our list of target languages to basically do more and deal with implementation at a deeper level with the partnerships that we've built.
Well, especially for Mozilla volunteers, if they hear LSP, that is referring to a language service provider. It's basically a translation agency. So Mozilla has a few of those to help with the marketing legal stuff. Boy, so are any of your products, because given US has a lot of children from immigrants, are the foreign languages version of your programs used by the by the US market in the US, or mostly for outside of US?
So yes, Spanish, it's we get a lot, like our top usage for Spanish comes from the US, then all of Latin America, and then Spain. So we do distinguish between Spanish Latam and Spanish from Spain. But I also love hearing the various stories about, for example, there was once this Vietnamese student had recently immigrated to the US, and her granddad was visiting, and a teacher had described that they were literally crying because they were able to use one of our tutorials during an event, a parent-student event, and they used it in Vietnamese, and that was super impactful for them. So while the investments towards localization are focused on broadening our reach globally, it is always a joy to know that even in the US, like students from all backgrounds are able to learn computer science in their own language. When I immigrated and was struggling to learn English, like having materials in my own language would have been helpful for moving forward and getting me to catch up. So I that's it's another joy of the work.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, to see the fruit of your effort is enjoyed locally here, right? It's not just on remote. What about you, um, at Con? Like you have so many programs, and I think it will help, especially the humanity part. Like as computer science, sometimes like, okay, the coding is probably most likely in English, or maybe I'm totally wrong by assuming that, but then humanity and some other subjects, it's not good, only good for just students, what we consider student, but we're all students of some subject, right? So
Yeah, so inside the US, our usage is also mostly in, well, after English, of course, in Spanish. That is actually a language that we use an LSP for, and not the communities. But while for all the languages that are translated by communities, they're mostly geared for their own country, because that's where their interests came from. Of course, we do have some usage in the US, and any content that is, so for example, in our platform, a teacher that from an English speaking classroom can assign work to a student that recently immigrated, for example, and if it's available in any language, French, German, Armenian, if it's been translated by an international community, it will be available in their language. So we have that, especially, for example, here in California, we have a huge Armenian community, so we have a lot of usage of that language. So we definitely have, like, our platform is structured in such a way where if the content is available in that language, it can be reached by a student in the US very easily, and it can still be assigned by a teacher, even if the teacher does not speak the language. So that has been super helpful for several users. As Jorge was mentioning, when people immigrate, I'm an immigrant as well, and it would have been super helpful to be able to access math exercises and things like that, and see them in my own language. And now people like me can, and they can use basically Khan Academy in their own language.
Well, maybe you can briefly describe how the localization process works. I know you have different models, and just pick a typical one, let's say a community supported one. Just start from finish. They saw the content, they said, this is the one that I want to localize. How does that work, Akam?
So we have, as I mentioned, we have video, we have exercises and articles. The exercises and articles we translate via TMS. That's a little bit easier because it's text. The video is where it gets a little tricky, and it varies a lot by language. So we have languages that have the budget to do dubbing, or maybe they don't have the budget, but they are just very, very tech savvy, and they have gathered teachers, and they have basically created a team where they can actually learn how to dub really well, and they end up creating very, very wonderful quality content. And so we have several teams that are actually doing dubbing. And when not possible, we actually also well, it's not our own platform. We use Amara to get videos subtitled. And yeah, so basically, or some also for accessibility, some languages even do both. In that case, it's not subtitling, but transcription of after dubbing, they transcribe their videos. And it's just very, very basically whatever we can do, whatever tool we can create to try and help that process, we try and do that. And yeah, I would say most teams are doing subtitling just because it's a lot easier and cheaper than dubbing.
Faster.
But our platform does support dubbing as well.
Wow. And then they submit the code. I mean, if I'm somewhere else and then Wi-Fi could be an issue or internet can be an issue, to do that amount of work it seems like more complicated than just text content translation, right? And then
Yeah,
all the code
absolutely.
will be sent back to you be hosted at Con, or how does that work? Like once they're done with their submission or done with their localization.
It's actually through YouTube.
Okay,
It's
okay,
just like Khan Academy, like headquarters, or English, I should say.
okay.
We have a Khan Academy YouTube channel. Each language actually has their own YouTube channel where they upload. What we support them with is basically, guidelines on how to better do it, and also, they can. So we don't. Our platform basically is connected to YouTube, so they can do the mapping of their videos into our platform.
Mm,
Um, that's how it works currently.
okay, okay. And Jorge, do you
Yeah.
have a similar approach or something more creative?
Yeah, it's a very similar approach. So I'm gonna like look at like a few of the parts of through a magnifying lens. So for when community members or partner organizations want to take on a translation project, uh, I pretty much first check if the product is translatable, and if it's not, then have that conversation with the engineering team about what resources are going to need to be allocated to make it translatable. And once that assessment is complete and the work is executed, we delve into the like we find all the strings that are relevant to this resource and create and after I catalog all those strings, I make a task that will only display the desired strings for translation to the translators. And this process has been a great enhancement to the translator experience compared to the past years because, I mentioned that we have a gigantic repository full of strings that are sometimes not optimally organized. That's an area of improvement. Uh, Being able to catalog and filter and just like have all of the information in one place via tasks has been life-changing. We so that is, how we use the TMS to more slowly but surely more efficiently translate and help translators get oriented. Similar case with videos. We host them on YouTube, and we used to dub them and upload newer versions of the YouTube videos. And we still have the intention of doing that because we want to create a video with translated graphics on the video. But in the absence of that, in the absence of funding, if we can work with somebody who's dubbing outside of our target languages and can create a good audio file to add to the YouTube video, then that's a good proposition for us. If not, for our target languages where there is funding to uh, localize the video graphics, create the dub, we make the effort to upload the video via our internal tool that we use to create the levels. And by uploading it via this tool and through YouTube, so it's like a two-way process. This ensures that for some offline capabilities, the students or the teachers are able to display the videos if they have translated an entire course, which is available for some of our good tutorials. And an interesting kind of like you mentioned creative, so I'll talk about this. We have a ton of auxiliary material, so Google Docs, slides, forms, PDFs that are just hyperlinked all over our curriculum. And the challenge was, how are we going to unlock these resources for global audiences? And by snooping through the gigantic repository, finding the strings that contain the URLs, we kind of devised this hacky way of encouraging translators to, translate copies of these documents and replace the URL with the URL of the translated document. So that is one way to do it. Another area of improvement, but when the opportunity was there, we developed the process, and now we're making all of these resources available for teachers to use in their classrooms. And we also, when there is funding, we also recreate videos with local speakers. So there are times when we can mount up a video filming day with volunteers, whether they be our partner organizations, local software engineers, or tech personalities that are passionate about Code.org's mission. We bring them in and we recreate some videos to, inspire, we have them give some remarks ahead of the video, very short, and then have them inspire and have students see see themselves uh, in the videos and, serve as inspiration.
Wow. You both use the term that our volunteers may or may not be familiar with, is the TMS, that's Translation Management System. It's like our pontoon. I'm talking to the Mozilla localizers, and so that's where translation happens, to put it simply. And then you can track progress and so on and so forth. And so it sounds like you have all sorts of volunteers with different talents. They are all willing to help. Do you have an onboarding process, like for the newcomers who said, yeah, I want to help? And it seems like they have different interests. And so I just wonder your onboarding process, what that material looks like. I mean, to us, it's more like localizing the content, or how to use a tool and so on and so forth. I wonder what your material looks like, Cara. You do a lot of those work yourself.
Yes. So one of the basic things that we say, well, first, we start with an agreement, basically, because this is content that's being created, that's we need to make sure that the quality is there, that they invest the proper time, and that the proper time is invested in it to make sure that we, it's content that we're proud of on both ends. So we start with an agreement. We then, we have different stages, basically. One of the first things that like our stage one is basically creating that YouTube channel and having them get started with videos. And for that, we provide basically guidelines on how to create a Khan Academy style video, from, the best way to create the graphics, although if our videos are fairly simple, to, recommendations on how to better dub, or if they want to do subtitling. Of course, we get them the access to Amara, which is our platform, as I mentioned, not ours, sorry, but it's the platform we use. That will be like the first thing they do, is have them create a set amount of videos. After that, if they want to have a Khan Academy website, then there's a lot of UI strings to be translated. And with that, we basically, of course, because we have tons of materials in our website, we basically start with the most like front-facing, we basically have like a very long list, as you can imagine, of the content that needs to be localized and in what order. And it also, for them to have to qualify to have a website, they need to have translated a certain amount of courses. And that's because we, once we have a website started, it requires for us to like support it in several levels. So there's a technical aspect of it as well, to make sure that it's always available. And so our volunteers need to have completed basically at least 8 courses, which typically takes, depending on the size of their team, it could take a year, it could take a couple of years, it could take more than that. We don't set a deadline for them. We do let them work at their own pace. But we do have basically like certain goals that they need to reach in order to move forward to the next stage. And what our final stage, or like the most advanced of the teams, what they do is they are able to actually curate content. What that means is Khan Academy, while we have a huge offering, we sometimes don't cover everything in a curriculum. So for example, just to give you a very simple thing, a lot of the math content here includes inches, and
Yes.
that type of measurements, whereas in mostly everywhere else it's centimeters and meters. And
Yeah.
so basically the teams that are more advanced are able to create their own content to make sure that their curriculums are fulfilled and actually like they have the content that is necessary for their country. And yeah, that's how we work with the volunteers, and that's why we have teams in different stages of maturity, I should say. There's some of them that are basically at the last stage, some of them are barely starting or right in the middle. And so it's helpful as well to have them communicate in between each other. So because then that allows the newer ones or the ones that are not as mature to learn from each other, from the ones that are. So that's actually it's helpful basically that our community can communicate with each other and not just with us.
Yeah, oh yes, absolutely. Because there's only one of you.
Yeah.
And there are so many others, and then you have their learning curves, and they can definitely share that with each other. Wow, that's quite sophisticated, I would say, the onboarding process. Yeah. Jorge, do you have something too? You're even more, I feel like you're so under-resourced at the moment.
Yeah, I'm also the only localized person working on localization at code.org. But I alluded to the tasks that I create in our TMS. So I prep tasks. So I create a task, for example, for a new tutorial in a set number of languages. And after going through the strings myself, as if I was a translator, I begin to notice the the strings that might need like added context, and then start kind of conceptualizing for new translators where certain UI strings belong. And in other times, like for blocks for our for our blockly based programming environment, which we do translate for the younger kids, I include screenshots that I attach to the strings for the translators to know. On top of that, we add the links to the specific levels to certain strings, so that translators can just click and view where the string appears, and that leads to higher consistency for terminology. But back to the tasks. So I kind of compile like a style guide and glossary on the task to centralize the information within the TMS. So this was a great improvement from before, where I would create like a Google Doc, and then I would have to make a new Google Doc because things change, links break, etc. So I would say that I go through materials myself first, make the guidance, put it all neatly into our TMS, and then on a per string basis, I add extra context. And let's see what else. for videos, we also share a kind of like a style guide on the requirements to make a code.org video. And what else? We're not delving into a lot into trans creation at the moment. We don't have the capacity to support that. But it's something that I would like to. It's I think that an area of improvement is for code.org is figuring out what a experience for global audiences would look like that is different from the US. This is like a thought experiment for me, but can we create like an experience that would serve students and teachers that are not in the US that would only show content that is available in their language, which without, for example, showing them access to the AP course that we have going, which we won't make, which we won't be translating anytime soon or ever. But I guess never say never.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's actually, you bring a good segue to my next question in terms of customization. Because, I mean, courses, granted, science is science, right? But Carol, you mentioned about the metrics system and the measurement, that itself is very obvious. But on top of that, especially you said that you had tests, programs designed for different grades and so on and so forth. So does the company create content specifically for globalization, like outside the US market, or even for specific regions? So it's a lot easier to localize rather than, oh my God, this doesn't apply to my area, or we don't have such thing. Or if you say, I'm creating a course for this grade, maybe in a different country, it will be at a different grade, or however. How does the company address that type of interest, or maybe even a demand, like, oh yeah, I would like to have that, but it doesn't quite match with what what they offer into the market. So how do you do?
So Khan Academy does provide, so we don't have a single website. Each language has its own website, and that means that when you access Khan Academy from France, for example, you see the courses that are available in French. You don't necessarily see all the tons of other courses that are available only in English. We, as I mentioned before, we typically allow our volunteers to decide which courses they want for their country. However, there are some that we recommend they don't localize. Some of them, for example, are the materials for the SAT, for example. The SAT can, as far as I know, only be taken in English. So that wouldn't make sense necessarily for them to have in their own language. We typically basically do have a customized website. We also empower them to customize the content. There's certain limitations with our translation system that, for example, they can change. Speaking of measurements, they can change from pounds to kilograms, but they cannot change the number. So then we have to get a little bit creative because, for example, there was an exercise about a baby being born, I don't know, at 8 pounds. And when they change it to 8 kilos, that's a giant baby. So basically, what we recommend in those cases is just don't mention a baby. Find something else that's 8, that could be 8 kilograms that works for your locale. And that is actually something that we encourage, and we do. I wouldn't say necessarily that we transcreate, because it's a little bit more limited than that. There's certain things that we cannot change. But we do basically make sure that it's localized. And by that, for example, I don't know, there are certain fruits, for example, that maybe people are not as familiar in certain areas. We would change that. Maybe from blueberries, when we're translating in India, that's changed to mangoes, or a different fruit that basically makes more sense that our users will be more familiar with. So we basically in our guidelines, we basically say, make sure you're localizing and adapting basically for your own country. And these are the limitations that you have to consider, like the one with the numbers that I was mentioning. And yeah, that's basically how we customize, especially because we not always, but the most countries want to make sure they're aligned to their country's curriculum. And given that, at least for math and science, humanities also gets a little tricky because a lot of our courses, for example, we have heard that a lot of our courses from U.S. history have their perspective of the U.S. Typically each country has their own perspective.
Yeah.
So a lot of our translation is focused on math and science because that's the more, like general
neutral.
But the humanities content is available, and they can choose to basically localize it as well with certain limitations, as I mentioned, more like technical, not necessarily limitations as you can't change this or that, but we do have some technical aspects to be considered. And yeah, I would say that's how we basically customize. It is very it takes a lot of work
I can
teams
imagine.
from our volunteers, and yeah, and we basically throughout the years we have been creating basically guidelines and things to make it easier, and to make it more standard as much as possible so it applies to different locales and not just the certain specific ones. That being said, the experts in their locale are typically our volunteers. So we do leave some space for them to make decisions as well.
Yeah. So Jorge, I know you have programs for different grades. Does that, granted it's for teachers most likely, but if there are students, do you change your language or tone in the way you design the course depending on the grade? And so it's a little easier, and even the content, it may be more playful, the examples are more relatable. And then as a result, as a volunteer, if you translate it, hopefully you carry that same tone in the localized version.
Yeah, for sure. Luckily, we have very talented curriculum writers who do write curricula in language that's appropriate per grade level. So that becomes easier to translate for some translators. Of course, I still have to create the appropriate guidance and like send like the notes saying these set of strings are for students grades so and so, so make that consideration and let me know if you have any doubts. But similar to what Caro said, we rely heavily on our partner organizations. We even hire some of our partner organizations as our LSPs because they've been translating as volunteers from the beginning. And when we got the funding, we were able to elevate them as our LSPs. So it that just increases the quality of our materials because the people implementing are the ones actually translating the materials. So there's a lot of opportunities for them to get creative and actually localize the materials when they get to be too US centric. But it all, like, for me, it all begins when curriculum writers write the curriculum and providing them with guidance saying, make considerations about make the consideration that we're creating products for students globally, and if you can use a sport that is country agnostic, or if you could make let me know when you're using inches or or ounces or whatever, so that I can go into the go into creating tasks for translators and letting them know that where to find those areas that need certain localization. This all boils down to having communication and teamwork so that the guidance gets cascades down to the person that's actually translating.
Mhm. With so much work put in each of the products that you make, do the two companies ever collaborate together or leverage each other's knowledge, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel or something?
We do actually. So Khan Academy uses some code.org videos. For example, we have this course called AI in education, like artificial intelligence in education. And for that, we rely heavily on code.org videos. And code.org has actually been a partner of Khan Academy for several years. And that is just one of the latest courses where we're using their content, but they're basically that trusted partner on our end, and we collaborate often. There's always more that we can learn from each other, I would say. But we definitely already collaborate.
That's wonderful to hear. See, your effort is spreading through other channels and get more usage using the different level of visibilities. That's great. And actually, I was going through the code.org site, and I saw that you actually have this annual event called Hour of Code. Uh, and I look at the map where you have presence before. It's astonishing, and you must be so proud that you have partners and volunteers to help you spread the program, and tell us about how you organize the event and where the event has been held, or if you have some numbers to tell us. Yeah, Jorge.
Yeah, so the Hour of Code, it's how Code.org got started by the creation of one single tutorial. I believe it was the Flappy Bird tutorial, how to make a Flappy Bird game. And it was focused on raising the awareness of computer science, the careers one can obtain by pursuing computer science, and that computer science is not just about being a software engineer. It's about creativity, programmatic thinking, and creative problem solving. And a lot of people bought into that, and a lot of people saw, wow, this leads to a lot of lucrative jobs. So this gets back to one of the great joys of working at code.org, which is harnessing the enthusiasm from people from all over the world who want to bring computer science to their classrooms. And this translates into many organizations around the world reaching out to us saying, hey, like how do we get involved? And through the Hour of Code, we can bring these all of their will and enthusiasm into synergy and kind of like create this synchronous event where many students where many students try an hour of code, or like work on a tutorial, or create their own their own app or art project or story. So we've over the years, we've reached over 90 million students all across the world through the Hour of Code and our curricula. And this effort wouldn't have been accomplished without like the over 2 million teachers that we've reached over the years. And of course, our partner organizations that bring the teachers and students together and actually sign up their own Hour of Code events through our website, so that they get their little pin on the map.
Oh,
And for example, as this is these are awareness campaigns. Last year, to give you an example, our partner in in Saudi, oh no, the UAE gathered about 30,000 events where students were learning computer science for maybe the first time. So there's like still a lot of enthusiasm that must be harnessed and be translated into implementation in schools for like the whole year. But I think that by getting that little first step in the door with the hour of code, we can see that there's a lot of buzz and impact for what we offer.
That's wonderful to hear. I know we're almost running out of, well, definitely we run over time, but I have one last question to Kara. That I know I met one of your former colleagues before COVID, and you have an annual meetup event. I know COVID threw a curveball to a lot of the things that how we do things and what's unusual and now it's the norm and things are virtual. Do you still have those type of events? And how important it is to have those in-person event to engage and to share what's new with the company and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we do. Actually, we hold a yearly convention of what for our advocates, which is the term that we give our community and language advocates specifically. And it's super helpful because we're able to gather people from different teams. We gather all together. It basically just having that face-to-face helps so much instead of just being this email or send this ticket or whatever it is that you're using to communicate or forum, being the username there. So through the pandemic, we actually had to move online. We continued having the convention because we saw the value of getting together, even if we had to get creative in how to make that happen. Especially, we have so many different time zones that, some of us were online at 6 a.m. and some others were online at midnight for them. It was very tricky, but we made it happen at least a couple of times throughout the pandemic. So maybe not once a year, but 2 times in those 3 years that the pandemic lasted. And thankfully, we were able to gather again early this year. Several of our teams were actually traveled to Vietnam, and we were all together there. And it's always super helpful because we can learn from each other. We can have, there's also certain things that you can discuss in person. It's just easier to meet consensus sometimes than if you just go back and forth on an email. We see the value basically in getting that time together. And it's something that we are hoping to repeat next year as well. Now that people can travel, it's hopefully will continue in person. But if not, then we have by now we have learned basically how to hold it online. And so yeah, we try to gather. We also have a monthly meeting as well, and that one is not in person because that will be too too expensive. But yeah, it's we had to continue getting together even throughout the pandemic, just to make sure that we could still collaborate, and it helps a lot actually.
Well, I hope we get to see each other in person in the near future. And I thank you so much for that question, with that answer. We'll just wrap up because we are, oh my gosh, more than 20 minutes over time. But I'm so thankful for the two of you spending time with me, sharing your experience and knowledge and how you manage this hybrid model of, between partners and volunteers and make your produce fabulous programs that all of us can benefit. And I encourage our viewers to check out their website and pick the language that you know, and other than English, and take a course. Or if it's not you, your children or niece and nephews, someone taking a course. And I also want to thank our viewers for watching, whether it's live stream or the recording version. I hope you learned a lot. I certainly did. I really enjoyed the conversation. We'll have another edition in June, so stay tuned for that announcement. Thanks again, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.